Welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can set up Matrix, which is a decentralized communication network. Now think of something like Discord. Discord is a centralized network. No matter what Discord server you join, that server is always going to be managed by Discord. Matrix is different. Now with Matrix, when you connect to a server, let's say you connect to a community A server, they are managing that server. That server is run by them, that backend, everything to do with it is all managed by them. Now let's say you then can connect to my community, the TikToks Matrix server, then that's all running and managed by me. There is no big overlord corporation or whatever running these servers. They are all community run, hence a decentralized network. Every community, every Matrix server you connect to is run by an individual. Now, I just want to take 30 seconds before we jump into the video to mention that I have partnered up with GiveInternet.org. Now, GiveInternet.org are trying to provide internet and give out laptops and just devices to students in need in countries, developing countries or war-stricken countries and stuff like that, where they don't have access to internet and the devices that they need to, get the same opportunities you and I have, and that we really take for granted. Now, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for access to the internet and just the opportunities that the internet has, all the learning, everything that you can get, right? When you're in a situation where you don't have access to the internet, you're pretty much limited to the knowledge in your community and what's going on there, right? So if, say, you wanted to become a doctor or study and learn about what, how do you go about doing that? Without the internet and without someone that knows, that knowledge is really hard to come by, right? How do you even make that first step? Allowing and giving access to those students to have internet and to have the devices to be able to access the internet, they can then start bettering themselves and getting that further education and actually understanding that there is more out there than just what they see in their day-to-day life. That access to the internet grants them so much more opportunities. So if you're interested in supporting a great cause, which is GiveInternet.org, I will have a link in the description below, so please check that out if you're keen to help support. As a community of self-hosters, I think we all understand how important internet and the devices that we use on a day-to-day are for bettering ourselves and, giving ourselves that further education, no matter what that is. So again, if you're interested on helping a great cause, a link is in the description below. Go check it out, and I really appreciate any support that you can give. So, Matrix, what is it? So this is my Matrix server that I have set up. Now, Matrix is actually the backend, right? It's the server in the backend, and then you can actually use a few clients, which is the front end, to connect to the backend server. Now, I'm going to explain all of this in great detail, but I just want to give you a high level first. So the UI that you're seeing here, the app that I'm using to connect to Matrix, is actually called Element, right? So there's a few of them, and we'll cover what applications you can use in a second, but this is Element, and I think Element is kind of the main one that is used. So the great thing about these, if I actually come in here in the top left hand corner, you can actually see at TikToks, so that's the URL for connecting to my server. Now the great thing about this, even if you were to be invited to this and connect to my Matrix server, you could join my room. Like, I can invite people to join this. So for example, I can come under people and I can invite to the space. So if I want, I can actually share an invite link and I can just invite people. And then they can join and then away they go. Otherwise, if they had my Matrix domain name, which I'll showcase in a second with a separate user, they can actually just come in and actually just create their own spaces. So I can't even access these spaces. They're just using my network to be able to continue to do what they want to do. So again, think of it like Discord, but rather than being centralized and all of this has been run by some big corporation, it's all end-to-end encrypted, but it's running on, a decentralized network. It's span across, different people that are running these servers. So I think a good place to start is, let me actually just show you the separation between Element, which is what I'm using to access. So I'm going to log out of here and I'll just show you the process. Right, so this is Element. I'm just in full screen here. It's not like some OS or anything like that. It's just an application that I've logged into. And you can just install this. It's on Linux, it's on Windows, it's all on all of that good stuff. So the great thing here is you can click sign in, right? And then by default, it's going to use the matrix.org. But I don't want to sign in there. You can actually change this. So let's say you wanted to join my TikToks Matrix server. What you can do is just type in matrix.tiktoks.nz, if I can spell that right, and then you hit continue. So now we've set the home server to be matrix.tiktoks.nz. Now, what you can do is you can sign in, right? And the thing here is that you will need to create an account first because you're logging into matrix.tiktoks.nz, and every server and accounts on the server are individual, right? Now, I believe you can use Federation, which allows kind of cross connectivity across servers. Mine doesn't have that, and I think I'll cover that in a future video. But for now, it's an individual user for the matrix.tiktoks.nz. So now, if you wanted to create an account, you could just do create an account, and it's going to come here, and now you can set up a username, password, and you can just register. You could technically do this right now by going to that matrix.tiktoks.nz. I don't know if this is going to be up or what I'm going to be doing with this by the time it's up, but you could always try it. But if you already have an account, you can actually just sign in. So that's what I'm going to do because I already have an account, but let's log in with my root user. So I could log in right now, but you can see here it's saying I actually need to verify with a security key to actually log in with this account. So if I click verify with security key, it's going to ask me for a security key that upon when I first logged in gave me. So I can actually put it in here, or it actually gave me a file, so I can click upload. And you can see here on the second line here, I have security key.txt. So I'm just going to upload that. There we go. I've uploaded it and it says it looks good. So I can hit continue. And there we go. So now I've verified that I have access to my encrypted messages, and the other users will see I'm a trusted user as well. So I'm going to hit done. And now I can log in. So I've hit the home page here. There isn't much going on, but under the TikToks channel where I'm a user and have access, you can see now I can join that chat. So I'm like, wow. George is looking a bit nervous right now. So now you can carry out all your discussions. Again, if you're familiar with Discord, it's all pretty much the same. You can, in the top right hand, you can have a voice call. You can do a video call if you want. It's ringing. I can allow my camera. Hello. And I can just hang up. But you can see this is going to be great for if you've got communities, teams, all of that stuff. You can have your calls, your video calls. Right. So the process that we're going to go through for deploying Matrix. First off, we're going to deploy the backend for Matrix, right? The backend server, and we're going to deploy this using Docker. Okay, so the process is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to have all the Docker Compose, example files, all of that stuff in my document website, which is docs.tiktoks.nz. A link to the specific page will be in the description, so go check that out, which will have everything you need that I'm going to cover in this video. So we're going to use Docker to deploy the backend. Then we're also going to deploy another file that kind of deploys all the configuration files you need for Matrix. It's pretty straightforward. There's just a few caveats that I'll cover. And then how are we going to expose this? There's a few ways you can actually expose Matrix, but I'm going to expose it using Cloudflare. It kind of just takes the hassle off port forwarding, opening up ports on your router and stuff like that. And it handles all the SSL certificates and all of that good stuff. So it just makes things a lot easier. So that's the process. Deploy the backend server using Docker, and then expose our Matrix server using Cloudflare, and then we can use a front-end service like Element to access our Matrix server. Right, so we are on my production server here that I'm going to actually deploy a new instance of Matrix on. So let's go and create a new directory. So I have a folder called Docker, and in here I have all of my containers, well, they're Docker Compose files, right? So we're going to make a new directory, and we're going to call this Matrix. And we're going to go into the Matrix file, and we can start to create our compose file here. Again, all of these steps are documented in the docs.tiktoks.nz website, so keen to follow it there if I'm going a bit too quick. So what we're going to do here is make a new file, and we're going to call this nano.docker-compose.yaml. So we're not going to call it nano, we're going to use nano to create it. Now the Docker Compose we're going to be putting in here is very straightforward. So you can see that the service that we're going to be using is going to be called Synapse, and the image we're using is matrix.org synapse latest. So we're going to use the latest image. We're going to make sure it restarts always. So that means that if our server goes down for whatever reason, reboots, as soon as it starts back up, this container will automatically start up. We're going to be running it and exposing it on port 8008. If that port's already been used, feel free to change it. But if you do change this, you'll also have to change it in the configuration for Matrix when we get it all deployed. We're also going to be saying that the data for this container is going to live in this current directory we're in, but under the data folder. I'll show you this in a second. A key thing is we want to make this data folder. Otherwise, it'll be owned by root. If it's owned by root, you're going to have file permission errors. So That's just something to note. Don't worry, I'll cover it in a second. But that's all we need for the compose file, so we can actually save this and close down of it. So at the moment, you should just have a docker compose.yaml file. We'll clear the screen up a bit. Now the next command, so again, like I said, we've just got the docker compose file in here. What we need to do is make that data directory. So let's just make that data directory now. Make directory data, do an ls. So now we've got the data and the docker compose file. Clear this and tidy it up a bit. What we're going to do now is use a command to generate all the configuration files we need for Matrix. You don't need to worry about making these manually or anything like that. It does it for us. We just need to tell it where to go and what domain name we're going to use for Matrix. So I'm going to paste this command in now, and I'll go over it now. So we're going to do a docker run, and we are going to say, hey, look, all of these files that you generate are going to go under the data directory that we have in this current space where I'm going to run it. So it's saying within the Matrix directory that I'm in, you'll find a data directory, right? So that's where everything's going to go. And then we've got Synapse server name, right? And this is the part you're going to have to set. So it's got matrix dot and then your domain name. My domain name is techdocs.nz, okay? And for the sake of this video, and because I already have something using techdocs.nz, I'm going to change it to something else. So let me just backspace that out. And I'm going to change mine to alzim.xyz, which is just a test domain that I have. Again, in the documentation, it will be clearer where exactly you need to change the domain name. So make sure you have that open as we're kind of going along here. And that's all you need to change. So again, we'll just run over it. Everything's going to go in that data directory. So just make sure you're running this command within that matrix folder where the data folder lives. All you need to change is the domain name here. Leave it as matrix dot, then your domain name. And then everything else just stays how it is. So now we can run this and hit enter. It's going to pull down that image, and then it's going to run the configuration deployment that's going to put all those files that we need in the data directory. Because at the moment it's empty. And I'll show you in a second, as soon as this is run, where everything's gone. So now if we do an ls of the data directory, you can see we now have our configuration files. Now, something to note here is if we clear the screen up a bit and just do an ll, we can see that the data directory is owned by 991. This is a requirement of the container. We need to make sure it's owned by 991, but we also need to make sure the contents inside the data directory are also owned by 991. Otherwise, you're going to get permission issues when you deploy your Matrix server. So let's change directory into the data directory, and let's see what the permissions are. And you can see these are actually owned by root. This is going to cause issues when you try to deploy your Matrix server. So we need to change these to 991 as well. And let me clear the screen. So remember, they were owned by root. We're just going to run this command here. So it just means that everything in that data directory is going to be owned by the UID, user ID 991. So we'll hit enter, put in our password here. I always get it wrong the first time, and the second time. There we go. Okay, I got it this time. So now, if we go back into the data directory, we can now see all the files are owned by 991. Great. If we were to deploy it with the root permissions, it would error out, but now we're okay. So we've got the data directory, we've got our Docker Compose. I hope so far it's been pretty straightforward. Now, right now, if we were to deploy this Docker Compose.yaml, we would spin up our Matrix server, we'd be able to connect to it locally, and we'd see that it was running. But the thing is, we won't have a user, and also, if we wanted to invite people, they wouldn't be able to create accounts because by default, account registration is disabled. Now I'm going to have an example homeserver.yaml file that will have all the user registration and that set up, but I'm also going to go through it now. So let's go check out that homeserver.yaml and see what we need to change. So let's go into there and change directory into data, sudo nano homeserver.yaml. So this is what it looks like by default. So it's got our server name, matrix.alzim.xyz. That's how we're going to access it. The port we're going to connect to it on. Again, if you change that, make sure that's actually changed. We're going to be using a SQLite 3 database. So this is an internal database. This is okay for small communities and stuff like that. If you're going to get a lot bigger, you're going to want to use an external database, something like Postgres. But SQLite will work just fine for what I'm showcasing, but again, you're going to want something bigger and beefier if you're actually going to use this long term and like a big community setting. So now with enabling registration, which we're going to add here in a second, there's a few ways you can go about it. Now you can just enable registration so anyone can join in and they don't get any sort of capture test or anything like that. They can just make an account. That can be quite dangerous and people can kind of spam, create users and mess up your server. What I'm going to show you is we're going to enable registration, but it's going to have a Google capture. So that means that when they try to create an account, they'll get challenged, the am I a robot sort of thing, where they have to tick and it will check. What this means though is that you actually have to create a capture service with Google. Really easy, takes like 2 minutes to do, and I'm going to walk you through that, where you will create a secret that you need to provide. If you're not keen on using a Google service and the capture, there's other methods out there. Documentation will explain those other methods, but that's the method I'm going to use in this video. Right, so I'm just going to paste in these lines. Right, so these are the lines that I've just added. I've just kind of marked off a little of these so I don't actually reveal my full public and private key for this service. I'll show you how to get this in a second. But what we're essentially saying is that we're going to enable registration for our Matrix server so people can join in. And they can create accounts and we don't have to create them manually on their behalf. And then we're saying the enable registration capture is true. Now, if you just had enable registration true and you didn't have this one, your server wouldn't deploy because it's still going, you don't have some sort of way to protect your user creation. By default, Matrix will not let you deploy a server that has registration enabled without some sort of capture or security to prevent mass user creation. There is a way to bypass that. It's in their documentation, but again, it's not really recommended. So these are the lines that we need. Now, if you do want to create a Google capture, all we need to do is go to the URL to create this. So in Matrix's official documentation, this is a link to this will be in the description, is all you need to do is create a new site and go to the google.com reCAPTCHA admin create, which is here, and you just need to fill in a few things. Let me make this bigger for you. So add a label, so I'm just going to call this like Alzim Matrix, because that's the name of my server that Matrix is running on. And then if we come back to the documentation, it's saying we actually have to use the V2 capture. I'm not a robot because that's the only one that Synapse actually supports. Anyway, we need to make sure challenge V2 is selected and I'm not a robot checkbox is the one we're using. Now you need to add the domain here that's actually going to be used. So for my one, it was alzim.matrix.xyz. Okay, that's the one I'm using. So make sure you put your domain name in there and hit submit. Now, once it's submitted, it's going to give you the public key. So the site key is your public key, and then your secret key is obviously your secret key, which you will attach on these two lines here. So the site key, this one here, will go to your public, and then your secret key will go to the private. So I'm going to copy this, copy that site key. I'm going to paste in my new one. The reason I blanked out these ones here is because these are actually from an example server that I was using, which I just didn't want to reveal the keys for. But we'll put the fresh ones in here now. Grab these, paste that in. There we go. So those are the keys that I'm going to be using. Now, if we go to settings, and what we need to do is go to the bottom of that settings page and actually turn off the verify the origin of reCAPTCHA solutions, okay? So make sure that's off, otherwise you're going to get issues with the capture. And then you can just hit save. And that is our capture all set up. So back on the server, we've got our data folder and we've got our Docker Compose. In our data folder, we have these files here that have been generated for us, and we've added what we needed to the home server.yaml. Now, what we need to do now is create our Cloudflare tunnel so we can actually make our Matrix server public. But before we do that, let's actually make sure this is actually up and running and we can actually even access it locally. So let's do a Docker Compose up-d, which will deploy our server. And now let's actually just check the log. So Docker Compose logs -f, and everything looks to be booting up, which is great. So now let's go to a web browser and see if we can hit this locally. So I'm going to put in Electron Cloud and 8008. I just have a local DNS entry for this, hence why I can use Electron Cloud rather than the IP address. And I'm going to hit enter and see what happens. Actually, we don't want to search with Google. I'll put in HTTP, like that, and we'll hit enter. And there we go. If you see this, your Matrix Synapse server is up and running. And you can see here, hey look, it's running, it's up and running. To use the server, you'll need a Matrix client. Well, before we use a Matrix client, we actually need to make sure that our server is accessible over the internet so anyone can join it. And that's where Cloudflare comes in. Right, so when it comes to Cloudflare, I have actually made a video on this. I'm going to link it in the description so I don't have to go over it again. I've already made a dedicated video on how to install Cloudflare, how to get a tunnel set up, and how to expose your Docker containers. I'm just going to assume you have done all of that up to a point where you can now just expose your Docker container. So please, if you don't have Cloudflare installed or anything, check out that video, follow that through, and then once you've got your tunnel and everything created, all you need to do is follow from this point on creating an entry for it. So I've got my Cloudflare tunnel. You can see a bunch of services I have up and running and exposed. So if I go add a public host name, and in here we can now say what domain name we want exposed to what service I have running locally. So here it was matrix, and I am going to use it on the alzim.xyz. So let's do xyz. And it's going to be via HTTP because that's what it's running locally, and the IP address of the service and the port. Right, so that is the IP address there, and it's running on that 8008. So let's put that in, and we'll hit save hostname. Now what this means is we should be able to click matrix.xyz and go to this domain, and it should go to that exact same page we're hitting locally. And it does. There we go. So now you can see at the top here, it's got an SSL cert, and it's all accessed via the internet. So our matrix server, if you've gotten this far, it's now exposed publicly. Anyone can hit it, and you're ready to go. Okay, so we now have our matrix Synapse server up and running. It's publicly accessible. So what we need to do is create actually an admin user first. Okay, so while we're still in the command line, what we can do is run this command here. Again, this is in the documentation. And what we need to do is actually come up here and just set a few values. So for the username, just set your username here. So you can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call mine admin. Then for the password, put in a password. So for my one, I'll just put in testing 1, 2, 3, and then maybe a few special characters. And then this, and that's how you're going to put in the password, and this will set up your initial admin account, okay? So what's happening here is it's going to go into the server itself, right? The Docker container that's up and running. And it's going to run the register new matrix user, and it's going to use a few flags. So what it's going to do is it's going to create a user, which is called admin, with the password, and then whatever password you specify. The -a flag is saying that it's going to be it's going to be set up as an admin user. And then -c, it's just referencing that YAML file that we have all configured that actually lives in the container itself. You don't need to change this one because it's been run inside of the container, so this is correct on localhost port 8008. That's where it's running. So if we hit this, it should create our admin user for us. So hit enter. There we go. Sending registration request, and it was a success. So that user now has been created. That's our first user, and that's the user we will use to log in to our matrix server for the first time. Okay, so that's all the command line stuff done. You've made it this far. You can take a breather. You've done it, okay? The matrix server's up and running. You've got your admin user. You've got the capture, the Google capture, or whatever option you decide to go for. You've got your admin account. It's all up and running. We can now access it, okay? So we're all up and running. So what we need to do now is actually use a client that we want to access Matrix with. So if we click here, Matrix client, what this is going to show us is a few ways we can actually access our Matrix server and what, UI we want to use. So I already have Element installed, right? So all you need to do is click on the one that you want, let's say Element, and then you can choose how you want to download it. So for me, I just downloaded it for Mac OS. And then once you've installed it, you will get a page like this, which is how you can sign in. So what we can do now is click sign in, and you're going to get the exact same page I've got, and we want to edit this and point it to our actual home server. So mine was matrix.alzim.xyz, right? And I'm going to hit continue. Now, if there was any issue here, right, with accessing this domain name, it would have errored. So if it actually just came back to the sign in screen, you know that Matrix and Element can hit your Matrix server. Now we already have our root user, so we can actually use this. Well, our admin user. Mine's called admin, and then the password, which I've got here, I'll paste that in, and I can hit sign in, providing that our command and everything worked, and everything is running on the Matrix server. This should sign us in to our new Synapse Matrix server. So I'm going to hit sign in, and let's see what happens. There we go. We're in. This is a whole different server. You've seen I'm not in that TikToks one. There's no rooms or anything like this. we are in. Of course, it's all empty. There's no users here, but let's create a new room. Let's create a space. So hit here, and we'll make this one public, and we'll call this the Alzum space. Hit create. And now we can create a room. So I just want general and hit continue. And there we go. So we've got our space, we've got everything set up. Now, how does that user work? When new users want to join, what was all the work that we did for enabling user creation? How does that actually work? Well, I'm going to show you that now. So let's say we've just invited someone. We want to invite someone to this space. So let's go invite. And we're going to share an invite link. Now, let's pretend I got that link. I'm a new user. So I'll paste that in and hit enter. And now it's coming here. Hey, look, you're going to open up Element. I've already got Element installed. If you had something else, you could use that to open it, and we'll hit continue. But before we do that, let me just log out first. Right, so I've just signed out. We'll hit continue here. And there we go. So you can see I'm actually as a guest, but what we're going to do here is actually sign up. So we'll click sign up, and we want to edit this here. So we don't want to be joining on the matrix.org, right? So we want to go matrix.alzum.xyz, that's the server. We'll hit continue. There we go, and now I can hit register. So we'll hit register. And there we go. So now, if we didn't have the enabled registration, it would have just shown us, hey, look, this server doesn't allow registration, and that's the end of the story. But here we have enabled registration, and since we have registration enabled with a capture test, this is now showing up. So now we can click I'm not a robot. It's going to do that test for us and does all the Google magic in the back end to actually validate us. And now we're in. Now we can choose what we want to do. I'm just going to skip this and click no. Now I can see that room, that invite link didn't quite work. So let's actually just try that URL again that I got sent, that invite link. So let's just paste that in as if someone just sent it to us and hit enter. And it's saying here, hey, cool, we're going to try join the Alzum space, which is on the matrix.alzum server. Hit continue. It's going to open up Element. So let's go back to Element. And there we go. So now it's got an invite here to the Alzum space. Hit join. And there we go. We can see that general room that was made, and we can join the discussion. And we can see, admin made a change and whatnot, and we're here. So hello. And if I logged into the admin user, they would see that message. So that is setting up a Matrix Synapse server that you can now have a decentralized discussion service, whatever you want to use it for your community, for your family, for your work, whoever, right? So this is just a way to get away from things like Slack and Discord, where you are conscious about your data, where it's going, and you just want to have a bit more control over that, and just if you trust those individuals in those communities that you're with, rather than big businesses like that, and you're not quite sure how they're handling your information, this is where Synapse Matrix comes in and really helps you get onto that decentralized side of things. Now, I know I covered a lot, and I think this is one of my longest videos. So if you have any questions around what we've covered, join. Seems a bit weird at the moment. I have my Discord server. Feel free to join that. I'm keen to migrate over to a Matrix-based service when I can really get it up and running and on a solid network. But yeah, jump into that space. Ask in the YouTube comments below. More than happy to help you there as well. And then yeah, we can go from there. But make sure to check out the documentation website. That will have all of this as well. It's all broken down, all the steps we covered in the video. But thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. If you've made it this far, please check out GiveInternet.org. If you're keen to support them, that would be awesome. Leave a like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.